Hey, what's going on, guys? Emmanuel here. Welcome to my TypeScript Crash Course. Now, this course are for absolute beginners who are looking to learn what TypeScript is and how to use TypeScript. Now, we are basically going to start up with some slides and then we're going to dive into Visual Studio Code and start writing some TypeScript code. Now, what is TypeScript? TypeScript is an open source language developed by Microsoft and it's a superset of JavaScript, which means TypeScript is basically JavaScript. It's not a new programming language. TypeScript is still valid JavaScript, but it adds additional features to JavaScript. It's just like how Node.js adds additional features like file-based routing and server-side rendering to React, which means every TypeScript file is a valid JavaScript file. If you create a TypeScript file and you write JavaScript code inside that TypeScript file, it's still going to run because TypeScript is basically JavaScript. But it adds additional features to JavaScript. Now, one of the important features it adds to JavaScript that is very, very important to developers is static typing. Now, eventually, TypeScript is going to get compiled down to JavaScript, which means every TypeScript code you are going to write, you have to compile them to JavaScript before you can run that code, because browsers don't understand TypeScript. They only understand JavaScript, which means if you want to be able to run your TypeScript code, you have to first of all compile them to JavaScript before you run the code. TypeScript can be used for both front-end and back-end development, which means you can use TypeScript for your React application, Next.js application, Angular application, and you can also use TypeScript with your back-end application with Node.js. Now, using the features like TypeScript brings to the table is actually optional. You can create a TypeScript file and just write basic JavaScript inside that file, but that actually goes against the reason we are learning TypeScript in the first place. Now, there are some pros and cons of learning TypeScript. First of all, TypeScript is popular in the job market. Lots of companies want to see that you know how to use TypeScript to build applications. TypeScript is robust with lots and lots of features. It's easily readable, because when your codes have TypeScript, you can actually easily determine which variables and functions is going to take numbers or strings. It becomes actually easy to read your code when you are using TypeScript. And lastly, and most importantly, TypeScript allows you to spot bugs faster. Now, the good old days when we were building an application with JavaScript, there are some times when you write JavaScript code that are not actually valid code. Now, those codes are actually wrong, but JavaScript is not going to tell you. Now, when you compile those code, maybe you run your application, you will not find that your application is going to crash because the code you wrote is not valid. It's an error. There's actually bugs in that code. TypeScript allows you to spot errors in your code faster, even before you compile your code. It's one of the things that makes me love TypeScript a lot. Now, there are actually some cons to TypeScript too. Now, one of those cons is that you have to write more code. Now, since you are adding types to your JavaScript code, you're adding things like strict type into your JavaScript code, you actually have to add extra code to actually make that work. And lastly, TypeScript requires compilation. Like I said, browsers cannot run TypeScript, they only run JavaScript, which means whatever TypeScript code you write, you first of all have to compile it down to JavaScript first before you can run that code. Now, with that, let's dive into Visual Studio Code and start writing some TypeScript. Now, inside my Visual Studio Code right now, I basically have no files or any code whatsoever. We are going to start this tutorial from absolute scratch. Now, the first thing we are going to do, we are going to install the TypeScript compiler globally in our local machine. I want to come over here. I'm going to open a terminal, new terminal. Then I'm going to type in npm install, spell that install correctly, install globally TypeScript. Then you are going to click on enter. Now, I already have TypeScript installed in my machine, so I don't have to run this command again. Now, to check if the TypeScript compiler has been installed successfully in your local machine, we are going to make use of this command tsc --version. Now, click on enter. Then you can see right now we have TypeScript compiler version 5.8.2. Now, your version might be different from this depending on when you are watching this tutorial. But if you can see a version in your terminal, that means that the TypeScript compiler has been successfully installed in your machine. The next step is I'm going to create my first TypeScript file. I'm going to come up here and create a file. I'm going to call this file app.tx. Now, after that, I'm going to create a TypeScript config file for our project. To do that, I'm going to say tsc --init. Now, that command is basically going to create a TypeScript config file in our root folder right here. Now, the TS config file is basically a JSON file that holds all our TypeScript configuration. It is basically where we write all the rules we are going to use to compile our TypeScript file. You can see right here, we have the version right here. And when we scroll down, you can see the module type is common.js. And also right here, which is very, very important, we have strict mode set to true. Now this street that is set to true is very, very important in TypeScript. This is what actually does type checking in TypeScript. Say I set a variable and the variable I set it to be of type number. Then I decide to modify that variable and set it to a string. Now TypeScript is going to throw an error, and this was responsible for that. Now when we turn this off, it's just basically going to feel like we are writing JavaScript. We can write our code without adding any type, and TypeScript is not going to complain. Now this actually goes against the reason we are learning TypeScript, so we are going to leave it as true. Now in my app.css, so I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to say let age equals to 16. Now when I hover over this variable right here, you can see right now it has a let age of type number. Now what is happening here is that TypeScript is assuming that this is going to be of type number. TypeScript is actually right. It's actually type of number. But the essence of using TypeScript is that we want to actually specify ourselves that this is always going to be a number data type. So how do you do that in TypeScript? You're going to come over here. Then after your variable name, you're going to use a colon. Then after that colon, you're going to pass it in data type, which is going to be of type number right here. Now to check if this is working, if in this code I decide to modify this variable and set it to a string of Emmanuel, you're going to notice right away that TypeScript is going to throw an error. Type string is not assignable to type number, because we've stated that this variable is always going to be a number data type. I'm going to get rid of this. Then I'm going to say console.log age. Now to run this file, I'm going to go over to my terminal, expand this up. Then I'm going to say node app.txt. Then you can see right now, immediately we get thrown an error right here. Now, the reason why this error is being shown in our terminal is because, like I said earlier in the video, when you write your TypeScript code, you have to compile your TypeScript code to JavaScript. That's because browsers and Node don't run TypeScript. They only run JavaScript. So every TypeScript code you write, you have to compile down to JavaScript first. Then you now run the JavaScript file. Now to compile this JavaScript code, I'm going to make use of this command right here, tsc, then the file name, which is app.txt. Enter. Now you can see that our app.js file has been created and compiled. Now when we open up this app.js file right here, you can see right now that it basically has the same code as our app.txt file. The only thing that is left out is that our app.txt file has this strict type right here, number, while our app.js doesn't have that. Now to run the code, now we're not going to run our app.txt file. Since we've compiled it to JavaScript, we're going to run our app.js file. So we're going to say node app.js, enter. You can see right here 16 gets logged to our terminal. All right, cool. Let's move. Now we can actually declare another variable. I can declare a variable. I can say let username equals to a variable, which is going to be a string data type this time around of Emmanuel. Then I can specify that this is going to be a data type of string. I can also create another one, get rid of this. I can say let is developer equals to true. Then you can specify the data type. This is going to be a data type of Boolean. Okay, cool. Now we can move on. Now, what if we want to actually pass values to an array? How do we specify the type of data type that array is going to take? All right, let's do that. I'm going to comment this out. Down here, I'm going to create an array called ages. It's going to be ages of students in a classroom, stuff like that. Then I can pass in group of ages. I can say 15, 35, 20, 55, 40, just a bunch of random numbers basically. Now, how do I specify the kind of data this is going to be? I can come over here, then I'll say this is going to be of type number. Then you can see immediately TypeScript is going to throw an error to us. You can see right here, type number is not assignable to type number. Now, what this means is that this is actually a number data type, but it's not just a number data type. It's more than one number. It's actually an array of numbers. So you have to actually tell TypeScript that this is going to be more than one number. It's going to be an array of numbers. Right here, when you hover over these ages right here, you can see that I say type number, which has this array symbol right here. It's not assignable to type number. It's going to be a normal data type, but it's going to be an array of numbers. You have to specify that it's going to be an array. Then I'm going to put in this right here. Now when we save that, you can see right here that our TypeScript error is gone. Now these are, you add type to an array. What if it's going to be an array of string? We can say we want this to be students. Let me just say names of students in a class. So now it's going to be a type of string. Then we have to specify it's going to be an array. Then we can say it's equals to Emmanuel, David, Jane. Now you can see everything works fine. But if right here I get rid of this string right here and then I pass in a number, you can see immediately that TypeScript is going to scream at you that type number is not assignable to type string, which means this array is only going to take a string. Now, there's actually a data type in TypeScript known as the any data type. Now, I will only advise you to use this only in extreme situations where you don't know the data type of a particular data. So I'm going to come down here. Then I'm going to say I'm basically going to call this y equals to an array. Now, this array is going to take in a name, which is going to be a string. It's going to take in a number. Let me say 17. Then it's going to take a boolean, which is going to be true. Now, if I say this is going to be of type number, I'm going to notice immediately we are going to have an error that type string number boolean is not assignable to type number. Now, when you make use of the any type, I'm going to notice that error is going to disappear right here. You can add any data type to this array. Now, like I said before, I will advise you to use the any keyword in TypeScript only in extreme cases, because making use of any is just basically going against the reason you're actually learning TypeScript in the first place. Now that we understand type annotations in arrays, let's move on to type annotations in function. I'm going to get rid of this. Down here, I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call this function greets. And this function is going to take two variables. It's going to take a variable A and a variable B. You can see immediately TypeScript is going to tell us that the parameter we are passing to our function has an any data type. It has no type. But let's forget about that for now. So this function is basically just going to return A plus B. Now the challenge we are going to face in this function is that now if I pass a number to this function right now, because this function is basically going to greet maybe something like hello world or hello Emmanuel, which means it's going to concatenate sentences together. Now, if I pass in a number to this function, the function is basically going to add up those numbers. Let's actually test this out. Down here, I'm going to call this function greets. Then I'm going to pass in the two arguments. So the first argument, I'm going to pass in 4. Then the next argument, I'm going to pass in 5. I'm just going to wrap that in a log statement. So say console.log, whatever the function returns, log it to the console. And let's compile that tsc app.tx. Right here, our code has been compiled down to JavaScript. Let's actually run this JavaScript file. I'm going to say node app.js. Then you can see that 9 gets logged to our terminal. But what we actually want this function to do is that we want this function to do something like this. When you pass in a value, say you pass in hello, and you pass in another value called Emmanuel, we want this function to concatenate those values, then output something like this, hello Emmanuel. You understand? But based on the fact that we are passing numbers to this function, the function is going to basically just add up those numbers right here. Now we don't want this, we want to concatenate the values, which means this function should only take in strings. So we have to tell TypeScript that this function should only be able to take in arguments that are of type string. So let's do that. Over here, I can say I want this to be of type string. Then I want this B to also be of type string. Now immediately you are going to notice that we have an error right here. Argument of type number is not assignable to parameter of type string, which means this greet function is allowed to take two arguments, which is going to be of type string. So right here, I'm going to get rid of this right here. Then I'm going to say hello. Then right here, I'm going to say Emmanuel. Add a space here. Then I'm going to save that. Compare our TypeScript file to JavaScript, tsc app.tx. Then run our app.js file, node app.js. You can see that hello Emmanuel gets printed out to our terminal. Now you can also specify the kind of data that a function is going to return. Right here, when I concatenate these two values, it's basically going to return, but we want to actually control the type of data it's going to return. We want it to return a string. So to do that, I'm going to say I want this function to return a string data type. Now, if I try to return a number in this function right here, I pass in a number, it's going to throw an error that type number is not assignable to type string, which means this function must only concatenate these two strings right here and then return a string after that. I'm going to return back. I'm going to save that. Now, when I run tsc app.ts to compare our code to JavaScript, then I'm going to run node app.js. You can see that hello Emmanuel gets printed out to the console still. Next, we are going to talk about types and interface in TypeScript. Now, say I have an object right here. I can say const person. This is going to be a person object right here. Now, this person has a username of Emmanuel. This person has an age of, let me say 16. And also this person has a value called is developer. Then set to true. Now, what data type are we going to assign to this object? Right now, this object, I can easily just modify any of these values inside this object. I can say person.username. Now set it to a number. You understand? So we have to prevent this from happening. Now, how are we going to pass data type to values inside an object? Now, this person object right now is going to take a key username, which is going to take a string, a key age, which is going to take a number, then another key is developer, which is going to take a boolean. Now, there's no built-in TypeScript feature to actually add type to this, so we actually have to create our own type, and that's where interface and type comes in TypeScript. So up here, I'm going to say I want to create an interface. I'll say interface person. Now, inside this interface, all the values I have right here in this person object, I'm going to repeat them right here. First of all, I'm going to say user name. Now, it's not going to take any value, but instead it's going to take the data type that this value is going to take. It's going to be type of string. Then I'm going to pass in the age, which is going to be of type number. Then lastly, I'm going to pass in the is developer. If the person is a developer, then I'm going to say it's going to be boolean. Now, how do we pass this type to this object? We do that by coming over here and then say this object is going to take a key, because this is basically a key. It's a type key that TypeScript is going to use to understand the type of values this person object is going to take. So the key is going to be person, which is this interface we created up here. Now, when I come down here and try to access the values inside the person, you're going to notice that immediately I click on dot, TypeScript is going to autocomplete it. Now, TypeScript now knows that this is going to take a value of age, which is going to be of type number. It's going to take a value of its developer, which is going to be of type boolean. And it's going to take another value of type username, which is going to be of type string. So if I try to set this username to a value that is not a string, TypeScript is going to scream. TypeScript is going to say type number is not assignable to type string. So we have successfully added types to this object right here. Now we can actually use type instead of interface. Now, instead of interface here, I can take this off. Then I can say I want this to be type person. Then I have to use equals to, since I'm using type. It's still basically going to do the same thing that interface was doing, but the difference between type and interface is that interface and type, both of them are going to work fine when you're adding types to an object. Now, where they start to vary is when you start working with unions and intersections. Now, we're going to talk more about unions and intersections later on in this video. Now, there are situations where you want to have values in your objects that you don't want to be modified. For example, now we can say right here, we want this to have an ID of 23. You're going to notice immediately TypeScript is going to scream right here. Object literal may only specify properties ID does not exist in type person. So we have to specify the type. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say this is going to take a number data type, an ID with a number data type, and TypeScript error is gone. TypeScript is not happy. Now, you agree with me that when you are building an application, you want the ID for every object to be unique. Say you are getting that ID from the database or whatever. The ID is always going to be unique. But right now I can scroll down here and I'll say person.id. Then I'm going to modify that value to, let me say 50. Now I'm going to log my person ID to the terminal, console.log person.id. Then I'm going to compile this to JavaScript, tsc app.ts, compile to JavaScript. Then run my JavaScript app.js, node app.js. Then you can see immediately we have 50 in our terminal. The problem we are facing now is that I want this ID value to be unique. We always want the ID of an object to be unique. We want every object to have a unique ID. But down here in this code, I can actually update this ID to 50, which is wrong. I don't want this to be possible. Now, there's a way in TypeScript to actually specify that you want a certain value in an object to be read-only. To do that, we're just going to come up here and say we want this particular value to be read-only. Now, when I scroll down, you can see immediately we have an error right here. TypeScript will say cannot assign ID to ID because it is read-only property. And this is very useful when you have values in your object that you don't want to be modified. Things like IDs, dates created, and stuff like that. Now, I think we now have basic understanding of what type and interface does in TypeScript. So I'm going to actually call this person interface. Then down here, instead of person, so that we don't get confused between the variable name and the interface, I'm going to say person interface. And also change this back to interface. Then I'm just going to take off this equals to right here. Now, right here in this interface right here, every values here are actually required. If you take out just one value here, TypeScript is going to throw an error. You can see right here, property age is missing in type. So every value in this person interface are actually required. But there are situations where we might not know the value of a key. For example, let's say we have a key right here called car type. And this car type is basically going to be a string. Now, I can come down here and say the car type of this person. This person drives a Toyota car. Then definitely not everybody is going to own a car. Some person object you are going to create might not own a car. So how do you solve this problem? Because if, for example, now I created a person right here, say I created the person does not have a car, TypeScript is going to throw an error that property car type is missing in type. So you have to actually specify the type of car the person drives. And the person does not have a car. So how do you solve this problem? Now you have to make this value negligible, that it can be left blank. To do that in TypeScript, we're going to come over here, then we're going to use this question mark. Now that's going to tell TypeScript that that value is not required. So I'm going to arrange this up. Then I'm going to log console.log person.carType tsc app.cs, then node app.js. Now, after running this code, you are going to notice that our car type is undefined. That's because it has no value. It's not null, it's undefined. Now, that is the beauty of TypeScript. Now that I know that this could be undefined, I can actually check if I'm writing my code, I'm building an application, I can check if a certain value is undefined. So I can say if person.carType is equivalent to undefined, then I want to log to my terminal, console.log. This person has no car. As if the person actually has a car, then I want to log that car type to the console. I'm going to save that. tsc app.tx, then node app.js. Now, when I run that, you can see right here, this person has no car, gets logged to the console. That's because this person has no car type. If I say the car type of those person now is Toyota, then I save that, then I'm going to run it again. tsc app.tx, then node app.js. Mind you, when you are working with React, Next.js, or Angular, and you are using TypeScript, there's going to be a built-in compiler. It's going to compile your TypeScript code to JavaScript. You don't have to be doing it manually like this. I'm going to click on enter. Then you can see right here, Toyota gets logged to the console. Now next, we're going to talk about methods in an object. How to actually add types to a method. Now I can say this person object is going to take a method called greet. Then this greet method is just going to console.log hello. How are you doing? Now immediately we write this method right here. You can see right here, the object literal may only specify non-properties and greet does not exist in type person interface TypeScript. Now TypeScript is angry because TypeScript does not expect a method in this object. So we have to tell TypeScript that this object is going to take a method. How do we do that? Now after our car type data type, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say this is going to take a greet function. Now this is basically going to be a function, and this function is going to return void. Now in TypeScript, when you are setting functions and the function is not returning anything, like right here up here, when we created this greet function, it returned a plus b and it was returning a string. Now down here, we have a method that's not really returning anything. It's just logging to the terminal, hello, how are you doing? Which means we have to tell TypeScript that it's not returning anything. Now to do that, I'm going to say it's going to return void. I'm going to log this method to the console, console.log person.greet. Save that. First off, I'm going to compile the code tsc app.ts. Then run the JavaScript code node app.js. Then you can see right now we have hello, how are you doing? Now you can actually pass an argument to this method. I can say I want to pass in the name of the person.username. Now you're going to see that we have another error right here because TypeScript does not expect an argument in this method. So you have to tell TypeScript that this is going to take an argument. So up here, I'm going to say it's going to take an argument called username, which is going to be of type string. Now in this hello, how are you doing? Now instead of making use of this quotation, I'm going to change this to backticks. So I want to add dynamic variable to it. And say hello, how are you doing? My name is $. Now we have to actually pass in the parameter to the greet method. Yes, I'm going to say it's going to take parameter called username, an argument called username. Then down here, I just want to print out that username. So it's going to say, hello, how are you doing? My name is, then the username, then tsc app.tx, then node app.js. Now right here, it's going to say, hello, how are you doing? My name is Emmanuel, because the person username is Emmanuel right here. All right, cool. Now this is how you actually add types to values inside an object. You are going to be making use of interfaces or types in TypeScript. Now inside the terminal right now, you can notice that after my hello, how are you doing? My name is Emmanuel log statement, I'm getting an undefined. Now what was happening is that this greet method already has a log statement in it, which means when I run this greet method person.greet and pass in this argument right here, it's going to log hello, how are you doing? My name is, then the username. But the problem is that I'm not actually logging this to the console. When I say console.log this entire code, what this code is going to assume is that it's going to assume that I'm trying to log the return value, and this code is not returning anything. You can see right here, the code is going to return void. That's why I'm getting this undefined. So to actually get rid of that undefined, I'm just going to clear this off from our code. Now I'm going to run it again, tsc app.ts, to compile my TypeScript to JavaScript, then node app.js to run my JavaScript file. And now we have hello, how are you doing? My name is Emmanuel, without the undefined, getting logged to the terminal. All right, cool. Now let's talk about unions and intersections. First of all, let's talk about unions. Now say I have a function right here, function print id. Now all this function is just going to do that, it's going to take in an argument, then it's just going to print out that argument to the console. The function is going to print out the ID that is being passed to it when the function is called, console.log. Then it's going to take a parameter, and that parameter is going to be called ID. Then it's going to print out that ID. Now you can see right now we have to specify a type. So we have to say this is going to be of type number. Now down here, I'm going to actually call this function. I'm going to say print ID. Then I'm going to pass in an ID number to you. I'm going to say ID of 45. So I'm going to compile this down to JavaScript. ts app.ts. Then node app.js. Now when I call that function, you can see right now that ID of, let me expand this a bit. ID of 45 gets logged to our terminal. Because we are logging ID, then the ID number will pass to our function. Now this actually seems perfect, but what if our ID is coming in this form? Say for example, now in our database, our ID is coming in this form, ID 45. Because sometimes when you are working on an application on the front end, you don't know the way the ID is going to be coming from the back end. Now the data type of the ID is only going to be known by the backend developer that actually holds the API you are trying to call or fetch data from, which means you as the front-end developer, you don't know the data type that the ID is going to come from. So if I pass in this ID form right here, you're going to notice that immediately TypeScript is going to throw an error. Argument of type string is not assignable to parameter of type number. Okay, cool. Now the reason for this is because we've told TypeScript that this function is going to take an argument which is going to be of type number, but this function might also receive an ID in this form which could be a string. So you have to tell TypeScript that this ID can either be a number or a string. Now that is where unions come in. So we can say this is going to be a union of two data type, which is going to be either a number or a string. And now our TypeScript error is gone. Now let's compile this down. tsc app.cs. Then I'm going to run my JavaScript file, node app.js. Now you can see that the ID 45 gets logged to our terminal. Now you use unions for values that could take more than one data type. Now this can actually take more data type. I can say this can also be a boolean. You can add as much data type as you want as long as you are making use of union. Now you're going to notice that the more types we are adding to our function, the more this parenthesis is going to expand, which is not actually clean code. Now let's actually clean this up a bit. Let's actually write our type separately. They will not pass that type to this function. I'm going to get rid of everything here. I'm going to create that type up here. I'm going to say type ID is equals to a union of a string or a number. Then instead of passing string number or string and number, I can just pass in the type ID right here. Now I want to save that. Everything works perfectly. Now this is actually the difference between type and interface. Like I said, for creating types for objects, you can make use of type and interface, but for unions and intersections, you can only make use of type. If here I decide to say, okay, I want to make this interface, I'm going to notice immediately we get an error. Let me take off this equality sign. You're going to notice that we have an error right here because you cannot make use of interface when you're working with unions and intersections, and that's the basic difference between interface and type. I'm going to go back. Now that we understand how unions work, when to use unions and how to use unions, now let's talk about intersections in TypeScript. Now, I'm going to create an interface down here. I'll say interface person, which is basically going to take two values. It's going to take a name value, which is going to be a string data type. Then it's going to take an age, which is going to be of type number. Then down here, I'm going to create another interface. I'm going to call this interface employee. Now it's going to take the company this person works for. Which is going to be of type string. Then it's going to take the position of this person in the company, which is also going to be of type string. Now next, let's create an object. I'm going to say const staff is equals to an object. It's going to take, first of all, a name property. Now this name of this person is going to be Emmanuel. I can use John. Let me use John. It's shorter. Then it's going to have an age of 20. John is 20 years old. Then John works for, and since I'm making use of Microsoft's code editor, I'm going to say he works for Microsoft. And what does he do for Microsoft? What position does he occupy? John is a software engineer. Sorry. Now, this is where it gets complicated when we are trying to add types to this staff object. Now, we can say this is going to take a type of person. Object literally may only specify non-properties, and company does not exist in type person, which means this company and position property does not exist for type of person. Now that translates to the fact that we have to actually add another type to this person type. So we can do what we did for the ID. We can say, okay, it's going to take either a person or it's going to take an employee. Okay, cool. Now our TypeScript error is gone. Now let's try to access one of these values. I'm going to come down and say console.log staff.company. And you notice immediately we have an error right here. Property company does not exist on type person or employee. What is happening now? And like I said before, when we were talking about unions. Now, when you say a value is going to take either this or this, when you are using unions, person or employee, that means that the value can either be this or this, not both of them combined. But what if you want to actually combine both of them together? That's where you use intersections. Now let's create our first intersection. Up here, I'm going to create my first intersection. I'm going to say type staff is equals to an intersection of person and employee. Then I'm going to get rid of this right here. And instead of having a type of person or employee, it's going to have a type of staff. Then you can see right here, our error is gone. CSC app.cs. Then node app.js. Then you can see that Microsoft gets logged to our company because we are logging console.log staff.company. And this is basically how you use intersection in TypeScript. You're in a situation where you have an object that has a tab that's in between two interfaces, and you have to combine those two interfaces to create a tab for that object. That's how you make use of intersection in TypeScript. Alright, cool. Now let's talk about enums in TypeScript. Enums, which are short for enumeration, is a special TypeScript type that lets you to define a collection of related values. Now, enums are usually useful when you have a fixed set of options, such as days of the week, user roles, or HTTP status codes. Now, I'm basically just going to create a simple use case of where you are going to make use of enums in TypeScript. So I can create an enum here, enum user role. It's going to take a value of admin, which is basically going to be a string of admin. Then it's going to take another role called editor, which is just going to be a string of editor. Then lastly, it's going to take another value of a regular user, which is just going to be user. Now with this enum right now, we can create a function that is going to check user permission. So down here, I'm going to create a function. I'll say function check permission. It's going to take an argument, which is going to be role, then of type enum user role. Now, since I'm making use of this enum right here, I have access to all the values inside the enum. So I can check, I can say if the role passed to this function is equivalent to user role dot admin, then I want to log to the console.log access granted an admin. As if I want to check if the role is equivalent to user role dot editor, then I want to log console dot log access granted. You can edit post. S console.log access denied. You can only view post. Then down here, I'm going to make use of this function. Say check permission. I'm going to pass in user role.admin. Save that. Then I'm going to run my application tsc app.cs to compile my TypeScript with JavaScript. Then node app.js. And you can see that access granted, you're an admin, gets logged to the console. Now the good thing about this is that you don't have to come here and say check permission, then be spelling out the permission right here. You can just pass in your enums directly to your function and actually do your comparison using the same enum, and then you just have your log statement gets logged to the terminal. Now that is it for this course. I hope you enjoyed this course and got some value from this course. Now if you did, smash on the like button and leave a random comment below. It's literally not going to take anything from you, and also it's going to help the YouTube algorithm push this content to more people who are going to find it helpful. And lastly, if you've not subscribed, ensure you do that and turn on the notification bell so you get notified immediately when I drop helpful tutorials like this. I'll see you in the next video.